Good morning. Great to see you in Jefferson County. It's great to be here. Please have a seat. We are going to unveil, where's it at? Right. Okay, it's up on the stairs. So we're here as part of Florida's commitment to celebrate America's 250th anniversary, which will be basically a year from now, July 4th, 2026. And so we've worked with the legislature, we've worked with our Secretary of State, who's here with us, Cord Bird, to say that Florida really wants to celebrate this. It's a chance for young people to understand what it means to be an American, how our country came into existence, what are some of the principles that the country was based upon, but also give credit to the people that helped make that happen in our founding generation. So we were able to get on loan from Mount Vernon a statue of George Washington that we placed in the Florida Capitol. Amazing statue, and that symbolizes our affection for the founder of our country, for Washington's virtues and his leadership, and really was the glue that held the whole experiment together, because it likely would never have gotten off the ground without Washington. So that was something that was very significant. We do believe that there's remaking of the Rose Garden at the White House, and there's been a request to whether that could go up to D.C., and so obviously we would honor that. But we will be given approval to do a replica from Mount Vernon. I guess you got to get the approval from Mount Vernon. So one way or another, we will have that. But what we wanted to do was make sure that we are working with, because we've got a lot of counties in Florida named after founding fathers. We, of course, have a Washington County. We have a Monroe County. We have a Madison County. We have a Hamilton County. We have a Franklin County. And yes, we have here a Jefferson County. And so we want to make sure, particularly in those counties, that we are providing what we can from the state to have commemorations of those namesakes. And so what we'll be able to unveil today is a statue that the Secretary of State was able to acquire of the namesake of this county, Thomas Jefferson. And I think that that's something that's appropriate. We know that when we celebrate the 250th next July, that we will be reflecting a lot on the Declaration of Independence. Not only what is written there, but what those words mean, and also what went into it. And if you think about back then, when they had skirmishes with the in the colonial times with Britain over the Stamp Act, you had the tea in Boston Harbor, you had a lot of things that built up over probably more than a decade, but for most of that, they basically just viewed themselves as being treated as second-class citizens. They basically just wanted to be viewed as first-class Englishmen, treated no different than if they were across the pond. I don't think initially it was going to be as grand. I think these were protests where they were trying to assert their rights as Englishmen, and they felt that they were not getting that as colonists. And I think that's probably true. But as it built, it really got momentum. And so they then met in Philadelphia in 1776 to determine what would be the course of action that they would ultimately take. And to be honest, if you look at some of the things that they dealt with, some of these taxes and everything, honestly, they were, compared to how we're taxed today, was kind of modest. But they were very sensitive about if government could tax them and they had no say in it, even if it was a small amount, that they were basically consigning their rights away and they'd end up in the dustbin of history. And so they had to assert their right to govern themselves and to have a say into how these things are done. So they meet there and they make this momentous decision to actually declare independence. And that wasn't something that's done willy-nilly. I mean, you see now these people, like anything happens, people go out and virtue signal and they'll say this and that. And a lot of it's just hollow, right? Because you can go out and pop off on social media. You can do this. Nobody cares. Well, back then when they took that step, they were pledging their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And every single person that signed that declaration on July 4th, 1776, effectively was signing their own death warrant. Because if the revolution was not effective, they all assuredly would have been put to death. So they had a lot on the line. And probably isn't surprising how, we know even today it's similar. You had most people at that time were apathetic. So you had some that were in favor of independence. You had some that were in favor of remaining colonies of Great Britain. And you had a lot of people that, they just didn't want to be bothered by it. Maybe they wanted independence, but they didn't want to risk anything, all this stuff. And that's just normal. That's how human nature is. So these guys were really putting themselves out there. And so when it became time to explain why they were asserting independence, they had an opportunity to articulate these reasons in a way that would really mark a turning point in human history. And so they turned to Thomas Jefferson, who was 33 years old at the time. Now, look, 33 then is a lot older than it's considered now, but even then he was on the younger side of some of the delegates there. And so they turned to him to be able to put into words the reason for why they were doing this and to articulate the rationale. And Jefferson didn't come up with the rationales. There were ideas that were nurtured over many centuries that led to the American Revolution, but he was the one that was able to distill that into really powerful statements that live to this day. John Adams said that in the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson's words gave voice to a revolution that will echo through the ages. And that's been 100% true. When they sat down to sign the Declaration of Independence, the standard in government was that kings and autocrats would determine whether you had freedom or not, what your privileges were, and anything that you were able to do was basically a courtesy of the state. They believed in a divine right of kings, basically. So God is endowing the ruler with power, and then the ruler can kind of parcel out little crumbs to the citizenry as the ruler sees fit. And that really wasn't questioned for much of human history. The founding fathers in the Declaration, what Jefferson wrote, they turned that on its head. And they said, no, our rights do not come from government. Our rights as people come directly from, what Jefferson said, the Creator, which is God. And so God-given rights are there. The role of government is not to give you rights, but to protect the rights that you already possess naturally. So he articulated that and the purpose of government, and saying how we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that all men are created equal. Now, that was an aspirational statement at the time, but it was a revolutionary statement because they were asserting that the power ultimately resided with we the people, not with the government. So Jefferson puts pen to paper on that. That ends up getting published, and the Declaration of Independence really was the clarion call for the revolution, and it underlied everything they did when they got to Philadelphia a decade later and hashed out the Constitution at the Federal Convention in 1787. So Jefferson being able to articulate that the way he did was absolutely essential. And ultimately, how you say things, how you articulate, how people gravitate really is important, and those words have really reverberated throughout history. He also, as governor of Virginia, was responsible for Virginia's Statute of Religious Freedom in 1786. Even when we had the Constitution ratified in 1787, 1788, and you had the government start in 1789, even after they ratified the Bill of Rights, when the First Amendment, which says government shall not, no law respecting establishment of religion, you actually had a lot of established churches throughout the country, particularly in New England. there was a particular state church. So Virginia had been Anglican church was the state church, and Jefferson disestablished that, and he basically said it's not government's role to choose one denomination over the other. People have a right to believe the way they want, and so they don't have to pay taxes to one particular denomination church. They're free to use their money how they see fit, and they're free to worship how they see fit. And that was really a lot of the reason why you ended up having the First Amendment written the way that it was. He then became, when George Washington became president, he made Jefferson Secretary of State. So as they were debating the Constitution in Philadelphia, Jefferson was a diplomat in France. Not really much influence directly from Jefferson on the structure of our Constitution. I mean, obviously the Declaration informed what the delegates were doing, but he was not among the delegates that were hashing out the separation of powers, checks and balances, all these other things. He was over in France, and I think he had a very good time over in Paris and France at the time, and who knows what was going on then. But he comes back, Washington brings him back, and makes him Secretary of State. And he obviously had a lot of diplomatic experience at that point, and so was able to really help navigate the country away from getting drawn into a European war, because you had France and Britain were at each other's throats. France had helped us in the Revolution, but you had mostly in the country had affinities for England, because most people were English. So it was a delicate situation, and Washington really tried to navigate it, and Jefferson was doing it. But the main thing that happened when he was Secretary of State was he had a huge philosophical clash with another of Washington's cabinet secretaries, his Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. And the rupture occurred over whether you could charter a national bank and whether the federal government had the authority to do that under the Constitution. Jefferson said, hey, I'm reading the Constitution. It's limited in enumerated powers. The government doesn't have any authority unless it's specifically listed here. Hamilton said, well, no, yeah, you have enumerated powers, and then you also have a clause that says anything that's necessary and proper for bringing that into account, you can also do. And so it really created the first two-party system, because when Washington got elected, there were no political parties. They viewed that as very bad. And honestly, there's a lot bad about it even today. But they viewed it as very bad. But you had Hamilton's vision, which was, more urban, more industrial. And then Jefferson's vision was more agrarian and rural. And he would say more small d democratic. Hamilton, he would say, was more of an elitist. Although Jefferson lived as an elitist and as an aristocrat. So they were arguing over these things. But if you want to know about debates throughout American history that we have had about the role of government, almost all those debates trace back to Hamilton and Jefferson having the clash. And they were both really big intellects, really big thinkers. And ultimately, Hamilton, I think, won Washington's affection with his vision more than Jefferson did. But Jefferson ended up getting elected president in 1800, and then he was able to put his vision into reality. But it's interesting because he was viewing, they say it when they teach it in school, they say, well, he was a strict constructionist. Hamilton was a loose constructionist. And maybe that's the right way, but I mean, I think that a lot of people view it and say, you want to just accurately interpret the Constitution. And so if there's a robust power, then it's robust. If it's not, then it's not. Be that as it may, the caricature of Jefferson has been that he was very stingy. He read every single power very narrowly. You couldn't really move a muscle at the federal level unless it was specifically there in the Constitution. But then he had an opportunity to do something which no president has been able to do since then, and that's double the size of the country with the Louisiana Purchase. And it created a conundrum for him, because if you're going to be very stingy on how you view that, there was no explicit provision saying that you could buy land. Now, there were powers that would imply that, and that's why a lot of people were fine with what he did. But, he had to really wrestle with this. Ultimately, he pulled the trigger. It's got to be one of the best real estate acquisitions in world history that he was able to do, and it really set the stage for the country to expand and ultimately become what it is. He reduced the federal debt when he was in. That's something that I think a lot of people, appreciate this day and age. I don't think the founders would ever have imagined that we would have ended up having a debt to GDP ratio that's like 130% of our economy. So he really was fiscally responsible, and he did believe in limited government. He didn't want government micromanaging. He really wanted the states to be the leader and be in control of this. Now, some people looked at his presidency. There were definitely some missteps, the embargo of 1807, all this stuff. And I think it was Benjamin Rush that said, he loved Jefferson, but Jefferson may have had a little bit more genius than judgment on some of these core issues. So that's something that people have criticized him for. And he's also, of course, been criticized for having written the Declaration of Independence, saying that all men are created equal, and yet continue all the way until the end to own a lot of slaves. And people say, you were in Virginia, it was a plantation type society before the Declaration, but even other people that were in that, like George Washington, eventually freed all his slaves. Jefferson never did that. It was always a big struggle with him, and he would kind of agonize in these letters. But a lot of people have said, okay, he asserted everyone's equal. He said that we're small d democratic, but he really did live as an aristocrat and didn't totally fulfill in his personal life the principles that he put down. And so he's criticized for that. And I think it's totally fair. And I think it's fair to criticize any of the founders for the decisions and actions they make. But I do think it's wrong to demonize them and act like somehow 250 years later, like, oh, you did this. So take them for all the pluses and minuses. And even when he retired, he founded one of the great universities in this country, University of Virginia. He designed the University of Virginia. He was an architect and was able to do that. Honestly, this building is similar to kind of Jefferson's style of architecture. So he was a very multifaceted guy, not just a statesman. He was a scholar. He was a writer. He was an inventor. He did a lot of things that, you really probably wouldn't see too many people who were able to do that in this day and age. And so I think it's appropriate that the state of Florida is recognizing, all the people that helped bring into fruition our country. But I think here in Jefferson County, I think it's appropriate to be able to have a statute that's been provided by the state of Florida so people can see the namesake and really study, and particularly for young people, think about some of the major issues that they were dealing with at the time, how he navigated independence, how he navigated some of these things. Really, really significant history. So I want to thank Cord Bird for helping make this happen. We met at the end of last year, and I was like, we really want to do well here. We want to get this done. And I think we're really ahead of the curve with where other states are going. We've done the Washington. We have the Jefferson we'll unveil here. I know we're working on Hamilton, Madison. I think Franklin's in the works. We have that coming, which will be really, really good. And on it goes. And, we're not just going to only do counties that have namesakes. We think that America's 250 is important to celebrate in a wide variety of ways across all of Florida, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So, Cord, you want to come up here, and we'll get this done?
Well, good morning, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Governor. I'm Secretary of State Cord Bird. I have to think that Thomas Jefferson is smiling down from heaven, seeing that we are in Monticello in Jefferson County at the courthouse in a statue celebrating his life. And as we celebrate American independence this week, it is fitting to unveil the statue of Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence. And I do want to take a moment. I see my good friends, Senator Corey Simon, Representative Allison Tanter here, and I know Supervisor of Election Michelle Milligan. Y'all have great representation here in Jefferson. But adopted on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration is more than a historic relic. It is a living testament to the ideals of liberty and self-governance. And the governor touched on some of those. And one of my favorite understandings of the Declaration is by Abraham Lincoln, when he said that the Declaration is a golden apple surrounded by the Constitution's frame of silver. Because it was, as the governor said, it's the Declaration that set out those ideals of liberty and self-governance. And I think that's just an amazing way to look at it. The Declaration propelled a revolution, and almost 250 years later, we continue to draw strength and inspiration from its words. Thomas Jefferson considered the Declaration of Independence to be one of his greatest achievements, and he spent his life defending liberty and inspiring Americans to cherish and protect our freedoms. As we prepare for America's 250th birthday, this statue represents not just our history, but our ongoing civic duty to remain vigilant in defense of liberty, a value that continues to shine brightly in Florida. And I was thinking that as we get prepared, this is Independence Week, and we'll celebrate America's independence on the 4th, under Governor DeSantis' leadership. Every day in Florida is Independence Day, so thank you, Governor, for that. As chair of the America 250 Florida Advisory Commission, I am proud to lead our state's America 250 celebration, and this ceremony is part of that. The commission is planning events in all 67 Florida counties leading up to and throughout 2026, ensuring every Floridian can participate. Our goal will be to engage as many citizens and visitors as possible, to educate our children about America 250 and the events and people that have made our country great. I want to recognize the Department of State's Division of Historical Resources, who played an important role in acquiring the statue and working with Jefferson County Administrator Shannon Meddy on the logistics of bringing this important symbol to Monticello. I especially want to recognize the Museum of Florida's History Design and Fabrication Shop for transporting and installing the statue here at the courthouse. He weighs about 1,000 pounds, so it was quite an achievement to get it here. Finally, as we prepare to celebrate America's birthday this weekend, let's take a moment to appreciate Thomas Jefferson and all the founding fathers who sacrificed their security and comfort for the cause of freedom. I also encourage you to stay tuned for a slate of America 250 celebrations being held across the state in the coming year. They will be family-friendly, patriotic, and educational events celebrating the birth of the greatest nation in the world. So I want you to party like it's 1776, have a great Independence Day, and thank you so much for letting us be here today.
Yes, sir. So I'll announce it, and then so since we were here for this, we want to do, so this will be the official unveiling of Florida's America 250 logo. So we're going to be doing a lot on this. We think it's really important, and particularly, as I said, for young people, we want our young people to understand what went into this country being formed. Jefferson, he really he provided the lyrics that has allowed a lot of people to do very well as a result of the principles that he articulated. But we've also we're not just like a one-trick pony, America 250. We've done more to stress American civics since I've been governor than we've ever done in the history of Florida. And I want to thank, I know we got a couple of our legislators here. Senator Simon, I mean, this guy gets more stuff in the budget for you guys than almost anybody. I mean, it's amazing. And you did pretty good, too, on some stuff. You did some good legislation, too. So, they've both been very effective in helping you guys. But I'm like, because they do the budget, and, they were like 45 days late. So I only had like a certain number of days. I think I had like 2 weeks to do it. But, there's each individual part I got to either sign or veto, right, or approve or veto. And so you're going, and it's like, Simon this, Simon that. I'm like, man, this guy gets so work. He works really hard to get all this stuff done. I'll tell you, you can see it there. But one of the things that they have continued to support is our Civic Seal of Excellence program. So we made the insight that, yes, we're going to say, you got to do civics. You got to teach the Declaration and the federal, all this. Yes, you do need to do that. And you got to have high standards, and you got to make sure people know. but you also have to have teachers that are well-versed and passionate about this stuff too. And the reality is that if you're going to a lot of universities in this country right now, you're probably not going to get a very good education on the foundations of America. It's almost viewed as passé. It doesn't fit into their ideological agenda. Obviously, people, they villainize some of these, you know, the ideological warriors in these universities have villainized the founding fathers. So you end up where even if this is something you want, you just may not have access. So we created, working with the Florida Department of Education, as well as a bunch of scholars around the country, people from like Hillsdale College, people from all these great organizations, and we created a 50-hour course. And so if you go through that, you get a $3,000 bonus for going through it. It's not just for civics teachers. If you're a history teacher, by all means, English teacher. Heck, if you're a science teacher, we want you to do, because we think it's important, because the insight is basically, we can sit here and say, you know, this kid needs to go to college and become a doctor. This kid needs to go college and go to business. This kid maybe go to trade school and will do this or that. Great. There's a whole bunch of different pathways. But every single person that comes out of our K system in Florida will be called upon to exercise the responsibilities of being an American citizen and being somebody that is that has agency over the future of the republic. And so we take that obligation seriously to make sure we're not just graduating a bunch of blank slates, that they actually have a foundation to understand what all these ideas mean, what went into it. Because I said, Jefferson wrote the words and he deserves immense credit, but there were ideas that were centuries in the making that informed how the founding fathers viewed liberty and government and all these things. And there's a whole bunch of different intellectuals. So we provide that for these teachers to be able to go. We've also done civics and debate initiative. Every county in Florida now has the civics and debate where they do these contests. I think it was like 7 counties out of 67 had it 6 years ago. So now we have all of them do, and we host the national debate in Orlando usually every year. But you know, the thing about debate, yes, it's important. If you can get comfortable speaking in front of people, that is a good skill to have in life. And it's not easy. And, you know, you get used to it after a while. I mean, you know, a lot of people like in Corey's chamber love to hear themselves talk, and they talk a lot. And so some people really like to, but not everyone's comfortable. So I think it's good to get young people comfortable, get on your feet, and be able to make a point and make an argument. And especially in an age where everyone's buried in their phones and thinks that that's the way you communicate and deal with other people. No, actually, the way you deal with people is in the flesh, and that can't become a lost art. So I do think that that's important. But I also think in terms of sharpening people's mind, the good thing about speech and debate is you're given a topic, and then they tell you which side you have to argue. So, for example, I'm a big believer in term limits for Congress, and I think we need it. And I've gone around the country and helped other states do what Florida's done to try to push forward on it. But maybe I get assigned to argue against term limits. Now, I personally don't find the arguments very persuasive, but it would cause me to have to maybe get out of my cocoon a little bit, look at an issue from somebody else's perspective, and then make some arguments about why something that I personally believe deeply in actually you. And I think one of the terrible things that's happened in a lot of our higher education around the country is when they're trying to impose orthodoxy, you end up graduating students that never have their assumptions questioned. And so they go and everyone kind of toes the same party line. They all have the same assumptions. And then you come out and you've never really been challenged on that. And I think speech and debate, your assumptions get challenged. You got to think more deeply about why do you believe what you believe? Why does someone else believe something that you may not think is right? Can you articulate that? So they've provided support for that, and I approved it in the budget that I signed the other day, and I think it's very, very important. So that is the foundation to then take us into the 250 that is really important. But as we have this 250, I do think that there's great opportunities to educate our younger generation about these principles, about the ideals, about the sacrifices that were made. Because, you know, it's one thing to sit here and say, oh, you know, I believe in this, but You know, how many people would risk everything in defense of the principles that you believe in? They did that. They knew that there was no turning back. Once they signed that document, they knew that they were on that target list, and they would not have lived to see their future had they not succeeded. So they went all in on liberty. They went all in on a really big historical gamble, but the gamble paid off because they were able to establish a new republic based on principles that were not just unique to 1776, principles that have endured throughout the centuries. And so that is something that's worth celebrating. That is something we will celebrate. You will probably be seeing more of this logo in the next year, but our view is we're going to keep celebrating leading up to July 4th of 2026 to commemorate 250. So you'll see us through the balance of this year and then all in the next year. And we've got a lot of cooks in the kitchen come up with great ideas to be able to really make this special in the state of Florida. Some states may not lean into this. Some states may just do their own. What I can only imagine what California is going to do. I mean, I can only imagine what New York City will do if this guy gets elected mayor. I can tell you that. So I don't know what they're going to do, but I know we are going to do where we're proud of the heritage of this country. We're proud of the ideals that we're founded upon. We are still trying to fully live up to those in what we do, all across the country. But it's a great standard to strive for. So God bless everyone. Have a happy 4th of July. Thank you.